Hi, I'm James Hedalen, CEO and founder of Kobrea Exploration. We're a new copper-focused exploration development company focused on Mendoza province, Argentina. We've been working on this Kobrea for about 4.5 years. 2.5 years we were a private company looking for opportunities in South America, and we have been after direct IPO, gone public and been public on the CSC, tickers KBX, for the past 2 years. We'll be making a number of forward-looking statements. So I just want to discuss the Kobrea opportunity. So what Kobrea has managed to obtain is a 733 square kilometer land package in the Neogene Porphyry Belt of Mendoza, Argentina. I'll explain a little bit about the Neogene Porphyry Belt. The big, catalyst to this story is the first mover advantage we have in Mendoza province. So Mendoza province, over the past number of decades, has largely been a province that has had no or very little to none exploration for copper. Mendoza was an oil-producing province. Obviously, it's where the wine district is centered in Argentina. And in April 2024, the government announced that the Western Malargüe Mining District was being created, and that's allowed companies to come in, such as ourselves, to explore and develop resources focused on copper. This is largely led by the governor of Mendoza. It's a vastly improved socioeconomic landscape. Several drill permits have been issued, and we now have, as of July 2025, the first permit issued to a public or foreign company in Mendoza. What we have are 7 projects. Each have a number of porphyry targets on them, or porphyry prospects. They're all copper plus or minus gold, plus or minus molybdenum prospects. Historical operators have identified 12, with 2 of them being mapped by Vale in 2011 to 2013. And just to note, it's modest elevation. Our highest target is just coming up around 4,000 meters. Most of the targets sit around 3,000 meters. Now, just a little background on the Neogene Porphyry Belt. This is where we are situated. So as you can see, there's the Chilean-Argentinian border, which is the peak of the Andes. In this belt, 2 of the 3 largest contained copper mines are present, with El Teniente and then the Los Bronces Rio Blanco complex. Miocene just refers to the age of these deposits. They're between 5 and 11 million years old. There has been some age dating. As you can see, the red dots are all Miocene-aged porphyries that have been identified. The only difference here is the Chilean side has been heavily explored, and obviously there's been some major discoveries there. In Mendoza, exploration has been limited to none. In our region, there's not been a single drill hole prior to 2025. A little bit about the terms of the deal. We signed this deal August 14th, 2024. It's a total of $6.75 million US over 5 years, largely backloaded, and then a share issuance of 3.5 million shares over 5 years, again, largely backloaded. We feel it's a very appropriate and fair deal for the land package and the opportunity here. There is an NSR, 1.5 NSR on mining projects. They've been divided into 5, each buyable back for 1.5 million US. So for a total of 7.5 million plus the option payments, we can own 100% of this ground, free and clear, no encumbrances. So I just want to discuss a big part of the story is obviously the province of Mendoza. It's one of the most thriving economies in Argentina. It's historically, again, been an oil-producing province, and obviously tourism and wineries. In recent years, in the past decade, oil has been waning. So the initiative was kind of pushed forward by the governor of Mendoza 6 or 7 years ago to develop a copper strategy. It has the mineral potential in Mendoza. It's just the province directly south of San Juan. And so they really had a concerted push to open up the province to copper exploration with the purposes of exploration, finding a deposit, and then obviously operating a copper mine in the next decades. What they did this time, in terms of previous attempts to open Mendoza to exploration, was they sectioned off a portion of the province, and they did that with a group called Impulsa Mendoza. So Impulsa Mendoza is a quasi-government vehicle adopted by the province of Mendoza to develop a modern, sustainable mining sector. So what they did, again, they sectioned off what's really a watershed. So there's no competition for land or water with any productive activity. There's no agriculture, communities, flora, fauna. They all got into a large-scale environmental impact study, which the government and Impulsa did on behalf of companies coming in. So they really greenlit the whole area by doing a background study, which took a number of years. Again, they started this initiative in around 2019, and by 2024, they developed the environmental impact study for the entire region and kind of greenlit the area for exploration and development. So this is what the Western Malargüe Mining District looks like in the southwest portion of Mendoza. It's the area that has been greenlit by an environmental impact study that has now been, by project basis, ratified in the Mendoza Lower House and Senate. So it gives exploration companies kind of the framework to explore. So when you're permitting now in this portion of Mendoza, you just abide by the environmental impact study, update it with your planned disturbances, which is actually a very efficient process. So our projects is shown in blue, 733 square kilometers, option to acquire 100%. There's good road access in the north, the central and southern portions of the project. There has been historical exploration. Rio Tinto first explored these claims in 1997 to 1999, and then Minza had them for 2004 to 2005. Vale had them from 2011 to 2013. None of those previous operators could get a drill permit, so they all kind of walked from the area. The projects have been maintained by the same vendors, the initial claim acquisition stakers of this ground in 1991, and we are the fourth group to option these claims and the first to receive a drill permit on them. This is a high-level look at a color-coded, just an overview of the projects. So it's really 7 projects. We acquired the entire portfolio from the vendors. Each project has, between 1 and 3 large-scale porphyry alteration systems that require exploration and, at the end, drilling. We have 2 that were worked up by Vale, so they mapped and sampled and conducted some baseline ground geophysics. We've gone in and checked their mapping, redone their mapping, sampling, and then we did a comprehensive airborne magnetics on the entire land package for the first time in history. So what our plan is to really rank these targets 1 to 15, and then drill them accordingly. So I'll run through a couple of the projects here. First project, which we are now permitted to drill and currently drilling, is the El Perdido. It's an explorer's copper porphyry center. El Perdido is a 2x2 porphyry copper plus or minus gold plus or minus moly system. Has mapped porphyry alteration, quartz diorite intrusions, stockwork veining zone, anomalous copper gold moly geochemistry, and a favorable geophysical expression. I will show you all these in the next coming slides. What our crews identified last season was a large-scale hydrothermal breccia, or a series of breccias, cutting through the interpreted center of the system. It's 1,700 meters by 250 meters. It's currently 5 kilometers from Provincial Road, and we have constructed a road to the top, and we just started drilling last week on this target. Here's a plan view map of the geology developed by our team of geologists. It's fairly textbook in terms of a porphyry. Have all the earmarks, all the items you'd want to see, and it becomes to a point where now it's ready to drill. This is what the magnetic vector intensity looks like. As you can see, you're looking at the magma chamber coming up and causing the alteration on the surface. On the top right is the copper geochemistry, where there is outcrop, and then there's the Astra study showing the alteration from the Astra satellite from 2003. Here's the anomalous geochemistry. Quartz stockwork zone is approximately 1.2 by 800 meters, 1.2 kilometers by 800 meters. Obviously, we have anomalous copper, gold, and moly geochemistry. It's a heavily leached environment, so the only way to test if there's economic mineralization at the target is to drill. So we're we're expecting a heavily leached environment, and we need to drill under this leaching. El Perdido, so the Breccias. So these are some of the pitches of the Breccias. We have some work to do on characterizing them, but they are early, they are mid. So we are going to be drilling the first hole underneath the porphyry stockwork into the Breccia to test the mineralization of the Breccia. This is examples of some of the veining at El Perdido, including the Breccia clasts and an A vein and a Breccia clast that we've discovered at El Perdido. I'll move on to El Destino. This was Vale's second ranking target. Again, it's currently a 1 by 3 kilometer color anomaly with all the earmarks of porphyries and a porphyry exposed at surface. In this case, we have quartz tourmaline breccias present. This is the Vale data and their mapping. So as you can see in the top left image, the north and south are bounded by a cover rock, Pleistocene ignimbrite, and we had theorized that if we conduct some magnetics, it could possibly grow. And this is what the magnetic shows. It shows our interpreted size of the system is now 2.8 by about 2 kilometers. And we are currently crews are checking the edges, or I guess it's the unconformity between the ignimbrite and the system to see if it dives under there and if we can find some porphyry mineralization. This is the mapping by Vale. As you can see, the pink there is where the potassic zone actually is exposed, and you're getting anomalous copper and gold in that potassic zone. This is the pipeline of the project. So this is the central region. It's a 20 by 5 kilometer trend of high level porphyry alteration. A number of deposit scale targets were identified by Vale. The Sophie project in the north, another 4 projects. Crews are working these targets as we speak. This is just an example of the Cajon Chico project. Hydrothermal breccias, rock samples with copper, 2.5 kilometers from a road, and crews will be working this up in the coming weeks. This is our property-wide exploration. This is the magnetic vector intensity for the entire project. The circles are the porphyries identified by Vale in 2011 to 2013. So what we are doing is we are currently have a field crew ranking these targets, mapping them, sampling them, and then the idea is to step through the targets once they are ranked accordingly and drill. Just an example of new targets. This is an area of the world that has not really been walked by geologists all that heavily. So this is just an example of a target that we were driving by. It looked nice, so crews hiked to the top and found some chalcopyrite intergrown, and the magnetics justify there being something up there, as well as the Aster study. Brief overview of the team: myself, CEO and Director; Rory Ritchie, co-founder and VP Exploration. Paul Johnston is our Chief Geologist. Paul Johnston was the head of Teck's exploration activities in South America for a number of years, spent a career at Teck. He is truly one of the world's top porphyry geologists, and we are very fortunate to have him on the team. He runs the exploration teams building up the targets and ranking and drilling them accordingly. Mito Patel and Pierre Clement are our other directors. And then on the strategic advisory side, we have Cal Everett and Darren Pilot. Share structure currently is 52.6 million outstanding, 32 million warrants. And prior to this season, we had $10 million of working capital after a raise in early October. Thanks for your time. My contact is below.
Okay, so James, good succinct presentation. Obviously, we'll get into the technical details about the projects with Rory and probably Paul as well in a bit here. But I'd like to take a step back and let people get to know you a bit better. You told us, you founded this company but almost 5 years ago now. What did you do before?
Yeah, so prior to this, I worked in the junior exploration industry for the past 12 years, since around 2012. I've done every single role in the junior mining industry. It's been a tough market for the last 12 years. So, whether it was being a GIS guy or raising money or writing reports or being in the field, I've done that all along the way. And then, a number of years ago, I just decided, okay, it was time. I knew enough people in the industry. I was able to start my own deal. And with Rory, we co-founded Kobrea. Again, the expressed interest was really, we believed in copper. This is kind of right, just coming out of COVID there, we believed in copper. There wasn't a lot of appetite in the copper exploration world. Obviously, it's been kind of decimated over the last 15 years, copper exploration. So that's really what we wanted to do. Prior to jumping the juniors, I had what I call a cup of coffee at Corp Dev and Tech. And that's really where I kind of caught the bug for mining and exploration, and just, the excitement of looking at new opportunities and seeing through your own ideas, and obviously partnering with, very good geologists is important in this industry. And then that's really kind of my background in mining. So I have a couple degrees. I have a geographic methods, which is basically geostats, and then a master's in GIS and an MBA in finance. And that's how I ended up at Tech for my short-term stint in Corp Dev, and then I went straight into the juniors after Tech, and I've been doing this for about 13 years in the juniors.
And you founded the company, and Rory was part of the founding, I guess. So how much do you own in the company currently? What was your personal interest? You're a young guy as well, which is fairly rare in the sector, which is good in my opinion. Energy outweighs potential experience, I would say.
Yeah, well, no, appreciate the comment. It absolutely. So we founded this with a group of nine founders, so 7 co-founders and Rory. So for the 2 years or 2 and a bit years, we were completely self-funded. So we each had to put up capital. We probably put up a total of about 1.2 million between us, and then went and looked for projects. We found our listing asset ourselves, built it ourselves, and then went for direct listing IPO. At which point we went to the market and were able to raise some money. We did a financing at 25 cents before we had the Argentina acquisition, and post acquiring the claim block in Argentina, we completed December 2024, so just over a year ago. We raised $5 million at 43 cents, and then just most recently in this past late September, early October, we raised another 8.5 million at 50 cents. And that's really the capitalization of the company. But again, it was 2.5 years just completely private, with a small group of investors in Vancouver. And then obviously we've broadened our horizons with our investor base as we've grown the story.
And how much do you own personally now of the company?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, personally now I have about 1.6 million shares. So that works out to notionally 3% of the company, 52 million out. So obviously
and this would be about equivalent for all co-founders?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's co-founders that one of my co-founders is my largest shareholder. So he's participated even in the 43 to 50 cent raise to maintain kind of a 9% stake. So the co-founders have invested all along. Rory and myself, we didn't have the capital, and I'll be honest, it's not even we didn't have the capital to invest. We had a lot of interest for the 50 cent raise and the 43 cent raise. So it was kind of, I'd rather have more investors in the deal, broaden our horizons, and increase our investor base.
That's good. And I'll ask a few, actually, since we're on the topic, the latest capital raise, 8.5 million Canadian raised. Who participated broadly, and can you give a bit more give this the shareholder structure now post raise, what it looks like broadly? Management, people close to you, institutional. What's the split there? Yeah.
So if you take into account the co-founders and institutional, that's probably close to 50% of the issue outstanding. This last raise we did a half. It was half brokered. So I put a syndicate together to broker it, and then half just a typical private placement. The reason to do that from my end was I wanted to go through a brokered process so that I could have kind of bank level due diligence on the deal, independent legal opinions on the agreements in Argentina, claim status, ability to work in Argentina. Mendoza is considered a place that was a mining no-go. So I think just putting a drill in the ground re-rates Mendoza as an opportunity. So with that, I was able to bring on the brokerage side some institutions in, and kind of high net worth individuals, brokers, and obviously some of the co-founders. So it's about 50% if you include institutional and the founders, and obviously Rory and myself, management, and then the rest would be kind of smaller institutional stuff and high net worth individuals is a large portion of our capital table.
Okay, so that gives a good sense of who holds the warrants and latest financing and so on. But the question is the older warrants.
Mm-hmm.
Who holds them, and should that be a cause for concern for people that may want to purchase shares now in terms of sell price?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it does come up. The older warrants so just some background on the warrants. There's some warrants from our private days that are kind of at the 10 and 20 cent level. And then the warrants from our kind of public raises are generally, I think they're all 50, 55, and 75 cents. The founders hold the vast majority of the low end warrants. They're not an overhang. I can say that with full confidence. It's just we didn't have a project, so when we were funding this privately, the founders got a cut of the warrants. And if you look at our warrant structure, I mean, it's really a third of the warrants came from the early private days. Again, with the founders, it's not an overhang. A third of the warrants came from the 43-cent raise, and a third of the warrants came from the 50-cent raise. Yep. It's not too bad, but yes, there is a lot of warrants, and yeah, we have to address that.
But if we do the arithmetic, then, so if you subtract out the founders' warrants, how many warrants remains in total? So basically in the range where we're trading now. I mean, basically like 50 to 75. We're at 60 now, so it's in this range. So these warrants can be a burden on, discovery.
Yeah, you're looking at, there was, about 9 million warrants issued on the 50-cent raise.
Yeah.
And then there was another maybe 13 million warrants issued on the 43-cent raise. So you're looking at about 21 million warrants in that 55 to 75 cent range.
Okay, that's good. I think you gave a very good account, briefly, but a good account of the history of both the project area and also Mendoza. So I won't dig in too much on that more because you gave a good primer. But I would like to ask, going forward, why should we be confident that this has longevity? When the Malay party perhaps is voted out, people, you might be very confident that they will stay, but why should people be confident that they will be a dominant force in the province in the next 5 years? Or is this a cause for concern for you? The longevity of the ability to explore here.
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's with a lot of South American countries, it's the history of stability, which I think you're referring to, which gets in the way. In terms of Argentina in general, obviously Milei's had a great effect on the macro issues and obviously getting the deals with the United States done, stabilizing the currency. But I will say that each province in Mendoza has autonomy on their own resources, which is why Mendoza was a kind of a no-go exploration development province, and then San Juan directly to the north was always kind of relatively open to it. That has changed because the economy of Mendoza, which was largely oil dominated, they need new income sources. So they chose copper as a strategy. They're committed to it. Current government and even some of the other politicians that were kind of maybe on the other side of the aisle prior to that are now on board. So just an example, when our latest batch of projects went through the approval process in the lower house and Senate, I think the vote was 36-3 in favor. So the support is there on both sides. I can't speak to the 15-year, 20-year longevity of any country right now, but I don't see in the near term, near term to midterm, issues with Mendoza specifically. They've done a really good framework. They rewrote the mining code. It's a very competent document. It's very thorough, and I'm happy it's thorough because it actually provides me protection as well. So everything is accounted for, and we follow the direction. Obviously, we have to be good stewards as a company to follow this, as we are the first. There have been private Argentinian companies that have got drill permits in the past kind of 18 months, just 2, but we're the first kind of foreign public company to come into Mendoza, show that it's possible, obviously with no drill holes in the entire 733 square kilometers in history. We're showing that it's good, but we have to be good stewards and work with the mining directorate and the new mining code. But they've done a really good job. to set up a framework that lasts. Is my point. It's not just something they thought about 3 months ago to chase the copper price or chase quick economic activity. They've been working on this since, like I said, 2019.
Yeah, and you have unilateral support, and again, at least Kobrea's business plan is probably not a decade plus. It's more like within the 3 to 5 year time frame, I would imagine.
Yeah. So the plan for Kobrea, obviously, with so many targets, you could say, okay, you have so many targets, it's too big of a land package for you to take on. But we are a nimble junior company. It's not a big corporation. So really, what we're doing is we have Paul and the geologic teams ranking and mapping and sampling these targets, and then Rory at VPX will, once they're ranked, we will step through the targets as best we can, like top to bottom, best target first, in efforts to make a discovery, and then obviously upon discovery, it's a matter of finding a partner at that point. Obviously, major company would be heavily interested in this part of Argentina, and really and go to sale as fast as possible. We don't want to be turning it into a science project that's 15 years, like you said. It's more, let's make a discovery and sell it or partner it out. But we want to make the discovery ourselves, and we feel totally confident in our geologic team and our capitalization to accomplish this.
And obviously, I think quite a few investors are familiar with the backdrop in Argentina generally, the interest majors who've left now re-entering or really trying to re-enter, and big success stories in various provinces and so on. So we won't need to dig in on that generally. I think the federal story is great, and I think you've given a good account of the stability of Mendoza, and obviously conveyed the undertapped geological potential is the same trend and hasn't seen any drilling more or less at all. So this is fairly crystal clear, I think, for most people. I would like to ask, just briefly on the listing choice. You're on the CSE. I know that there are some benefits to that, but I also know that there are some negatives to it. For example, for many European investors, difficult to perhaps get access through many brokers and so on. What's the rationale or any plans to change this?
Yeah. So good question. We listed on the CSE. It wasn't really, I didn't actually expect that I would have so much European interest in Kobrea at the time. The CSE was a little bit easier on the paperwork side when we were private. So we were obviously, the role of in the junior mining is to be as cost conscious as possible. So that's really why we went with the CSE to start. We are looking at potentially, the benefits of moving, the difficulty of that in the kind of near term, because it does, certainly for the European investor base, it does make a lot more sense to be on the TSXV. We have our OTC listing in the States, but it's, I have seen some, and I have had some phone calls with people, especially in Europe or Australia, that would rather us be on the TSXV. So that is something we're looking into. But the choice at the time was just easier on the paperwork, slightly cheaper, but not that much cheaper. But it was cheaper, and when we're all self-funded, it was kind of, let's just get listed as efficiently as possible, and then move once if it makes sense. And obviously, we want to give shareholders the opportunity to buy and sell the stock. So TSE is something we're definitely looking at.
Okay, so that could be something perhaps post drill program or something, first drill program.
Yeah, it's something that we would do when it makes sense. I mean, I have to obviously make the decision, but yeah, it would. During a financing, it doesn't make sense. During drilling, it doesn't really make sense in my mind. But we definitely entertain it soon.
So if we just talk about the budget, sort of high level, you've raised 8.5. You perhaps had a bit of cash left. So what's the treasury sort of going into? You've built the road now. You've gotten access. You started drilling on the 20th, I believe. What's the budget for this field? I mean, essentially this field season then. We're able to drill and do field work.
No, good question. So it's so going into the field season, we had just north of 10 million in the bank. The idea for the 10 million number was 2 full seasons of work, or 2 full years, leaving some contingency, a couple $1 million. So essentially kind of targeting $4 million a season. Largely that would be drilling. So it's drill costs, you're looking between $400 and $500 US per meter, and that's all in. That includes road building, camps, crews, assays. And so what we're budgeting is to get through the season, drill El Perdido, do our initial drill test at El Perdido, work up a number of targets, get to, if not all of them, most of them, but also spend a couple weeks on each one mapping and sampling. That program altogether is going to be under $1 million, and then the rest will be drilling budget, and then have enough capital to go in and do the similar thing next year, whether we're continuing to drill El Perdido, or ideally we're drilling 2 targets, El Perdido and say El Destino, on the next season, and we have the capital to accomplish this without going back to the markets right now. And that's kind of where the $10 million came from. So it's really spending kind of $4 million a season right now. But we'd like to be drilling 2 targets, and we're just in the process of actually doing the baseline studies, updating the environmental impact study for El Destino, so that we can definitely drill it early next season and get the road built into that one as well.
So takeaway is you have the finance to do 2 more. Complete this one, then return, I guess. Since you have the road is built now, and all of these things are implemented at El Perdido, so you would be able to access El Perdido next season in November or somewhere?
Yeah, late October. It depends on the snowpack, but the season is generally mid-October to mid-April. Obviously that varies from year to year. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's a little later. But yes, that would be the idea, is get the El Perdido stuff done. Obviously, it's very important to have the field crews with Paul leading them, doing the regional exploration, so that we have a number of ranked targets. Obviously, that ranking can change. If the crews spend weeks there and it becomes the number 1 target, then we will drill the next number 1 target. Obviously, El Perdido was ready. It was identified by a valet. It was ready for drilling, so we went in there and permitted that, and then got it drilled. Updated the environmental impact study, and then next season we'll be hitting both targets with drilling, and then obviously the point is to make a discovery, increase the share price, and then do another capital raise. So that's kind of gives us the runway to get a couple seasons before we have to go back to the markets.
And obviously, many of the Nordic investors who follow us are familiar with the Vicuña district and the discoveries. They made a lot of money in that district, many of our guys. And they also know some of the periphery stories there who weren't so successful, trying to take a sort of shot at the goal. Reason for that is obviously the very high cost, but it's important to note here, obviously you're financed to do, 2 programs and to do a good amount of thousands of meters, not just 2 or 3 holes per field season. You have to finance in between them. So that's a very important thing to take away here. But it's realistically, I guess we would expect here, if this first drill program, now you have basically 3 months, 2.5, 3 months to drill. If you want to do, go all that time, I would presume you will do 40 meters per day or maybe 30 meters per day. I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah. At the top of the hole, obviously it's better than that, and then obviously once you get a little deeper, the target depth is 500-600 meters per hole, but it slows down for sure. But it's reasonable drilling, and the drillers have been good. The company out of Mendoza, Contra, so they've been good. Yeah, exactly. So it's a matter of testing as much as possible on the first go rounds, and obviously the Vicuña district, we're not going to compare to that just yet, but that's why we consolidated such a large land package, was we needed to know we had a number of opportunities, and it's not just a single asset binary test. We need to be effective at realizing when a target isn't looking either big enough or the grade's not there to move on to the next one to make that real world-class discovery, because it's not a geologic reason that this hasn't been explored. It's just a political reason. We're just on the other side of the Andes, and Mendoza in general has not really been explored, and we're just the first to do it. So that's why we acquired such a large land package, to give us and our investors a number of kicks at the can, so to speak, rather than just acquire one project and then have kind of all your eggs in that one basket.
Yeah, and not to mention the backdrop of having the safety of being able to transact on a larger land package that gives you some sort of, controlling a big land package in a place like this essentially offers you real estate which is valuable in itself, which gives you a limited downside in many respects, in my opinion. But most importantly, this is, if you compare it to the Vicuña district, which people know generally, um, this is actually, unit costs here are more favorable across the board. They should be. So that's good. And you also have
Yeah, and
finance for 2 seasons, which is very good for a small company.
it's much cheaper to work here than the Vicuña district.
Yeah.
That's a considerable elevation. Ours is much more moderate. We are close to like Mendoza City, which is a few hundred kilometers to the north. They have a lot of the offices that service the mining industry already in that city, so they're quite happy to work in their home province. Rates are pretty good. Lots of geologic talent, lots of geologists, lots of support staff. So it's been a really great place to work. I got to be honest. Very supportive in the communities, local communities. We have offices down in Malargüe, and I would tend to agree. It's good value for the whole land package. I mean, obviously there's value to just having all this land, which would underpin some type of base value. Whereas if you have a single project with a single porphyry target on it, you don't have anything underpinning your company other than the hopes of a discovery hole. When we're going to walk through and ideally make multiple discoveries over time, and that's the goal, is a commitment to the district, commitment to doing the work properly, and doing it appropriately in stages.
And we'll get back to this, but I mean, basically, what it offers you. I mean, we have a district scale, essentially control over an attractive sort of IP such as this. You have the ability to deploy small amounts of capital, which is very very non-dilutive, to create quite a lot of shareholder value. It takes a bit more time, but you have that option in the background, right? And that can also be converted into non-dilutive corporations with majors. We'll discuss that too. But you also have the selective option to be able to go 100% like you do with El Perdido now, to really create convex value creation in the shorter term, and be able to drive like that. So it's a nice hybrid situation, right?
Yeah, and so I just want to be clear. Our plan and our mandate is not to be a prospect generator. I'm not looking to farm out all the projects and sit back in the office. But to your point, and that's what we're doing, and we'll have news over the course of this season. As Paul and the crews work through targets, we will show the market, this is what this next target looks like. And as we get kind of, right now there's obviously 2 mapped and sampled porphyries that are set up to drill. We'll have a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, and then at that point you get into some of the optionality of, okay, maybe there's a various deal structures out there that I have liked, that people have done with majors, in terms of just not letting them have too much say over your exploration plan, or just not taking the whole thing. But there's definitely optionality. We're open to that. Obviously that's something we'd look forward to, and that also provides some support in the market, having the quote unquote big brother there, providing some backup to you. But no, lots of optionality, and as we work up targets to a point where the value in them, I think that's what you're speaking to, the value of each other target has increased, therefore it underpins a better value in the corporation in general.
Yeah, because I mean, investors should look for, and this is not easy in exploration because it's very risky in nature, but they should at least try to make a case for having somewhat limited downside. If the first drill target doesn't hit, does the company need to panic finance directly and make up a new story, or do they have a big land package where they can do more work and or do more drilling? Because sometimes it takes 10 holes before you actually figure out that this is a really great deposit. Porphyries are
no, exactly. I mean, exactly. I mean, the exploration business is a tough one for sure. You need to basically give yourself the best odds you possibly can on each target and drill them. That's just in general, and that's the reason why we wanted so much land package with such good history, is that it's not, you miss drilling and then you panic and have to raise to keep the lights on. We're pretty confident with our plan, and we're going to stick to it. So investors that gave us money in the private placements and invested, we marketed it's a 2-year plan with the capital we have to make a discovery, and drill at least 2 of our 2 best targets in those 2 seasons.
And then obviously it's a permutations game, but on the other side of things, you hit in the first 3 holes, you're going to raise more capital to accelerate, obviously, but that's happy days for everyone anyway. So it's all good. In terms of you started on the 20th, so extrapolating, we would expect you would probably have time for 2,500 meters or something like this. And you could be cut off a bit earlier, but at least 2,000 meters. That should be 3-4 holes, perhaps 5.
Yeah. So you're going to speak to Rory, and he'll walk you through kind of our plan. But I mean, essentially, yes. Like we'll drill as much as we can up until the snow flies, to give ourselves the best shot to test the system. I mean, obviously, it's one of those things where you need to put down a number of holes to get a handle on the intensity of the alteration and the mineralization, and vector towards where the actual center of the system is. So that's where the first 3 holes will kind of come off one pad, so that we can we can vector from those holes, and then obviously drill subsequent holes based on what we're seeing in the core and what assays tell us. But yeah, that's really it. It's just do proper exploration. It's not, and that's what Paul and Rory are very experienced with this, and I take their lead on it. But I just it's cost effective. We're not going in there with 5 rigs, spending all the treasury. We need to go. It's not slow. We need to go fast, but we need to do it with the best possible tests. And we do the same when we look at these targets without drilling. It's the first thing you do: is it big enough? Is there potential for grade, or is the grade there? If not, don't waste our time. We move to the next target to work it up. And so drilling kind of becomes the same. If it's not appropriately mineralized, or it's not big enough, we have to move to the next target, because we're looking for large-scale deposits in a part of the world where large-scale deposits exist. So we're not going to waste our time or turn something into a 10-year science project that we have to continually raise on. It's our investors want to kind of be with us to have that chance at the large uptick, and that's what we intend to give them.
And then just very briefly, the expected assay times. I mean, what are you thinking? You'll ship the first hole, I would expect, here probably mid-February or 3rd week of February. The first hole is shipped. So when would you expect to receive assays generally? Like in late April, early May?
No, I think it would probably be sooner than that. I mean, there's the labs, like I said, are in Mendoza City.
Right.
I'm not sure right now what the turnarounds would be, but I'll speak for Rory. I mean, he's running the operations, but I would presume it would be late March. That's kind of what we've been discussing when I talked to those guys. It's not that slow down there. It's pretty efficient. They know what they're doing with mining and exploration and assays. Even though Mendoza's been obviously out of the exploration and development world for 40 years. A lot of the work from San Juan comes down and is processed in Mendoza City. So late March.
Okay, so we'll hand it over to Rory, and he'll go through El Perdido and El Destino a bit more thoroughly, and we'll talk a bit more about the operations and logistics as well with him.
That sounds great.
Okay, so we chatted with James and got a bit of a sort of a primer on the company. I'll cover all the corporate matters. Got an understanding of the budget and so on. But now we're here with Rory, who's a co-founder of the company, a geologist, and the VP exploration of the company. So I think, Rory, could you just talk a bit about yourself, your career, and what led you into co-founding Kobrea?
Sure, yeah. So I'm an exploration geologist, 20 years experience, mostly in the Americas, Canada, the United States, South America, a little bit in Bolivia, and now Argentina. My focus really over the course of my career has been really pure exploration for copper plus or minus gold porphyry deposits. So these, the same deposits we're looking at here with Kobrea in Argentina, in Mendoza province. I did have a fair amount of experience in orogenic gold as well in central British Columbia or central Canada and to the north in Nunavut, a little bit in the States as well. But really my passion is porphyry deposits. and when we started Kobrea roughly 4 years ago, the idea was to go where the biggest copper deposits are in the world, and that's really the Andes, the southern Cordillera. Ultimately, we landed on Argentina. I'm sure James spoke to that earlier, and then Mendoza province because of the opportunity and the world-class geology and just the underexplored nature of it. So that's generally it. Juniors, I've really been in juniors the entire time, so I haven't worked in mines. And for majors, it's just really just pure exploration, which helps a lot in the operational sense because there's a lot to learn, a lot to navigate in Mendoza. But so far, it's going well.
Perfect. So I think we'll start off the sort of geology segment here to just you start with we're drilling at El Perdido. So let's talk about why this is a great target. Why you think we have a decent success rate of hitting something in this field season. I guess mid-April. So let's pull up the model and sort of go through this.
Yeah, we can start here. Maybe I'll back out a bit. And I'm not showing the entire project. Obviously, it's 100 kilometers, north south. But really, what we're looking at here is we've focused in on the El Perdido prospect that is within the El Perdido project. We're looking east right now, just to give the viewers a sense of this is what we're drilling towards. What I'm showing here and all the different data sets I have, you for reference, really for plane of reference, you'll see the yellow outline, which is the extent of the phyllic alteration that has overprinted the potassic alteration that is shown in pink. But you do see that potassic alteration at surface preserved, and in other parts you can tell, well, this was potassically altered, but now it's been overprinted by phyllic. So these are the two most important alteration assemblages now. The one I haven't drawn on here is the propolitic. That is an early stage alteration, same time as potassic, but it's distal. You don't really expect any significant amounts of copper in the propolitic, so I've just left that off. As you can see, that yellow line, it really jives with the color anomaly. So that color anomaly is a function of the phyllic alteration, and then the kind of enhanced weathering of the superficial rocks. And what else I've shown on here, which will also be on all the slides, is the road that we built. I don't have the whole thing, but really the road, it was 16 kilometers of road. It came off of a provincial road that's maintained by the government. That is maybe 8 kilometers to the west. So pretty straightforward. The road wasn't bad. The only tricky part is when you're climbing the mountain, but even then, not too bad. And then that road climbs to the top and kind of drops down into that drill pad where you see the proposed holes there that I have shown. There's a translucency on all these data sets so that you can see those subsurface drill holes or the traces. Those are 3 500-meter proposed holes. We will likely go deeper on certainly at least one or two of them. Just for example, the first hole, which is drilling due east, it's coming into a hydrothermal breccia. We want to make sure we get well into that. So that's just kind of the general, original proposition there. 3 500-meter holes, but that's kind of subject to change as we move along. Right now, we're on that first hole that is drilling due east. So maybe if now that folks are oriented, I'll switch to the geology here. So I won't go into too much. There's a lot of units here, but generally they can be lumped into the surrounding host rock volcanics. Those are really andesites, and those are shown in kind of the green colors. And then you have various porphyry intrusions. By various, I mean different composition, different timing. And in these porphyry systems, really what you want to see is the early porphyry systems. Those are the ones that have been subjected to the most fluid flow, typically have the highest density of veining, which ultimately is what we're targeting here. We're targeting networks of stockwork veining with copper in it. So and then the third would be this hydrothermal breccia that I've outlined in red. That was something we outlined last year. It hadn't been identified by previous operators, which is surprising in the sense that it covers a big aerial extent. It's about, I think it's about 1,400 or maybe 1,700 meters by 250 meters. and it kind of runs north-northwest, south-southeast. And what we see within that is really a series of hydrothermal breccias. They're what we call intermineral breccias in the sense that they might not have been the first units to show up. We don't have a solid, handle on that, because I think drilling will really help, because they're very oxidized at surface. It's kind of hard to tell, but they have certainly been subjected to strong phyllic alteration. There's a lot of veining in these hydrothermal breccias, and these things can really boost your grade if they are copper bearing and relatively early, and also they just speak to the general explosive nature of the system. Breccias are a good thing. Porphyry systems are all about big releases of energy and fracturing the rock, and then the veining and the mineralization all comes after. So breccias are a good thing to see, and that's a big series of hydrothermal breccias there. So as you can see, that first hole that was drilling due east, which is the way we're looking here, I could maybe, just to give the people a sense of the topography, I'll just slowly tilt it over. So we're kind of set up at the on a saddle at about 3,500 meters elevation. We're drilling due east, at about a minus 50 degree, minus 52 degree. So the idea is you are trying to get a little deep, get through that leached cap, which you can see, which again is represented by that color anomaly. But you also want to get some lateral coverage as we try and get into that hydrothermal breccia. And so that's the idea with really the first hole there. So I've talked to the geology. Maybe I'll move next to some of the geochemistry. Yeah, before that, I'll touch on the aster. So this is just for the viewers' information. Aster is based on interpreting really frequencies that are gathered by satellites and reflect in light. And these frequencies can give you insight into the mineral compositions, especially those related to porphyry systems. So what you're looking at here, that red, all those pixels are really a high probability of cerussite, the mineral, which is a part of the phyllic alteration assemblage, as well as clays. There's numerous clays, but people kind of lump it into argillic alteration assemblage. So that's really what the aster is picking up. And you can see it's a pretty coherent anomaly. It sits in that within that phyllic alteration outline that I have. The aster itself is maybe a kilometer and a half by a kilometer and a half. We already know, based on our surface work, that there's phyllic alteration there, but just to give you an idea, and this is something we utilize across the project. It's cheap. You can cover big areas quickly, and it can highlight these porphyry systems. So I guess this would be an example of the aster doing its job, highlighting that porphyry system there. Maybe I'll move to the magnetics after, just to give you the general idea of the overall system. So, it sits in kind of the southwestern portion of a larger magnetic high. And actually this inversion you're looking at, although it's draped over the surface in this image, it's actually about 1,000, maybe 1,200 meters down. It's kind of a level, an elevation slice that's been projected to surface, if you will. So what it's telling you is that there is a magnetic body. We know, based on what we've seen at the target, as well as to the northeast, which is that stronger white magnetic high shown there, is that this is related to diorites. There's obviously a big dioritic magma chamber at depth, and then the porphyries, kind of these apophyses and these series of dikes come off the top of that. That's related to the generation of porphyry systems, is that it's about a larger magma body at depth that, as it's cooling and the fluids are exsolving off of that magma chamber, they come to the surface because they're full of volatiles and they're relatively light, and then those volatiles make their way to the surface or close to the surface. They make their way upwards through the crust, and then ultimately you precipitate those volatiles in quartz veins with sulfide, pyrite, chalcopyrite. That's the general idea. So you do need kind of a bigger chamber at depth. That's what we see here, and the apophyses seem to come up where the dikes and the veining and all that, where we have outlined this target here. So that's the situation with the magnetics, which can be helpful, again, to outline the mother magma chamber, so to speak, as well as to find the porphyries and the dikes responsible for mineralization and spatially related to all that good stuff as well. So that's another data set we use across the projects. But right now we're talking about El Perdido. So we've looked at the geology. I'll bring up the geochemistry here, assuming my computer behaves itself. Just to give you an idea. So again, I'm just going to keep that same kind of frame of reference. But what you're looking at here is copper geochemistry. So this is rock chip sampling. There's not a ton of outcrop, believe it or not. I know you are kind of at the top of the mountain. You can see at the ridge, there's a lot of exposure. But on these slopes, both to the west and particularly to the east, there's not a lot of rock. The outcrop is covered by colluvium. But you do have enough outcrops where you can do some sampling. And again, I mentioned it's a leached cap, so these aren't high grade, by any means, rock chip samples. But if you're seeing copper, in the 3 to 4 to 500 ppm, and within a leached cap, that's significantly anomalous. So that's what we see here. We see copper up to 760 ppm. Many samples between 400 and 750. And this is also coincident if I change over to molybdenum now. Molybdenum is generally in the same area. So now you're looking at molybdenum up to about 140 ppm, which again is significantly anomalous in this environment. And then gold, if I switch to gold now, again, you'll see coming up that it's really coincident, the same general area. Now you're seeing gold up to about 140 ppb. And I think actually the moly's a bit higher now. I think it's maybe 180 up to 180 ppm. So really you have an anomalous copper, gold, molybdenum, rock chip geochemistry anomaly. That's essentially what we're drilling into and towards. Actually, in particular, the second hole that's drilling to the northeast will cut through the best geochemistry. But again, there is geochemistry at the top of the hill where that breccia is intruded by porphyries and there's a lot of veining. So generally speaking, the area is anomalous for these metals. Okay, so that's the geophysics covered, geochemistry, geology. That's really it in terms of the data sets. I think it's important for people to note that the best way to target porphyry systems is to have a very skilled, talented porphyry geologist, an expert who can interpret these things. You map them out. You just read the rock, and really, Paul Johnston, our chief geologist, he is the guy. He's certainly the best porphyry geologist I've ever spent time with. I learned a lot from him over the last 15 years. He was really a mentor of mine. But that's his expertise. He's fluent in these porphyry systems, so he knows how to look at the rock, look at the minerals, figure out where you are in the system. Then there's simple things like veining, vein density, mapping how that changes over space. But my point is if you have exposure and it is a proper, well-developed porphyry system, it's you don't really need all these fancy tricks, geophysics, and different kinds of things. You can really figure these things out with just a skilled porphyry geologist. I'd like to think I am a skilled porphyry geologist, but certainly Paul is the expert in our group, and we're happy to have him. So he did that last year at El Perdido, figured out where the center is, and that's just based on the rocks and the veining and the alteration. And then do we drill? He says, yes. Okay, this is where we put the hole. So that's really what Paul is doing now across the projects in what we call our target development initiative. We have over, I think, upwards of 29 porphyry targets now that we got to essentially work up to a drill decision point. So it's a pretty unique opportunity in that sense. And again, Paul's job is to find A, is it a proper porphyry system? Okay. B, let's find the middle. That's generally where things tell you how good the potential is. And C, does it merit drilling? And then we plan. I plan the permitting and all that stuff and the operation program.
So I mean, it's great, obviously, to have a true domain expert. Many companies actually don't have that. They explore for something, and then they revamp the story, and they start exploring for porphyries, and they don't have a domain expert that really knows how to explore them, and that will waste a lot of time and capital, and can actually fail, the execution. So it's actually very unique, and we'll get to meet Paul soon. But I guess just to sort of steelman you here, or to repeat what you said, see if we got it right. The scale is there. You have a big alteration zone. It's
Mhm.
overlapping with the potassic. You have the structural control or structural conduit, which is the big Breccia outline which you mapped on the surface. So this gives you a vectoring. This is coincident with the geophysics, the aster, all these things, the geochemistry, all points you to this ridge that we're seeing here, the Breccia pipe ridge. And essentially this gives you the scale because the footprint is big in the alteration. It also gives you the qualitative target where you can zoom in. I mean, usually you define a multi square kilometer area for a porphyry if it's big. You can restart in the entire wrong location. It can take you 3 programs to find the right location, but you believe you have enough information to think that you have a much smaller area where you can actually hit good min early. So
Mhm.
that's important, I guess. But I guess is that a fair characterization? First of all,
Yeah, that's bang on. Yeah, you got it.
and in terms of the leach cap, so we don't have you cannot collect soils here because it's leach. You won't see any chemistry, I presume, in soils. So that's a bit different than a
Yeah,
soil.
it's really. I mean, there's no real soil. It's what we
Yeah,
call talus, which is just crushed up fine rock that's just coming down the slope.
yeah,
Rock chips are just a little more, because you're finding outcrops and you actually know where it came from, whereas the talus has just slid down the hill. So it's not, it can be useful. It can be useful for sure to kind of highlight an area for example, a regional exploration program. But again, the rocks and the alteration and the veining, we can kind of tell visually where the center of the system is. The geochemistry is just it's just a good sign. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess my question is, based on what's your expectation for the leaching? Because I would presume, and I believe Paul told me this in a past call, so I'm not going to claim that I'm very smart here, but essentially leaching goes deeper in the breccia pipe. Makes sense. Mineralization comes up potentially further, but also the leaching process goes a bit deeper. So, and you're drilling into the breccia pipe now as the primary target. So, how deep from the top of the ridge and alternatively from the pad would you expect the leaching process to really drop off? I guess it's based by analogy or
Yeah.
something like this, but a
Yeah. No,
range.
that's a good question, and you're right. So leaching is a function of the paleo water table. So as this, let's just say this porphyry system was formed at 2 kilometers depth.
Yeah,
And then as it uplift, you're in the Andes, there's erosion and then subsequent uplift. As the deposit really passes through that interface of the water table, you have minerals slowly getting dissolved down from the top down, and they get reprecipitated lower where you're back into that water table. So it can vary. It can be very highly variable, not just across from deposit to deposit, but also it can vary within that individual system itself. So Paul's general thoughts were, and I shouldn't quote him without his permission, but generally speaking, it seemed like on average, maybe based on what we've seen, it's 100 meters, something like that. And yes, where that breccia is in the middle, cracking through the middle, because of the permeability and because that water table all that stuff can permeate through that porous or permeable rock. You would expect a deeper leaching profile within that breccia. So, for example, if on average over the prospect it's 100 meters of leached cap, maybe in the breccia it's 250, 300. I'm kind of throwing out somewhat subjective numbers,
yeah.
but that's generally the idea of where we set up with our drill pad. Is by the time we get into that breccia, which is towards the bottom of the hole, we are deep enough that we should be seeing primary mineralization. That's the kind of design there.
Okay, so
If that makes sense.
and also, yeah, can you just explain a bit about how the topography varies? It's a bit difficult to see. I mean, top of the ridge, is that 100 meters vertical displacement or 150 or
Yeah. So let's see here. I'll give you an idea. Bear with me. I'm just gonna spin it around. Maybe we
okay,
can look along that ridge. Right. So there, and there's no vertical exaggeration here. So, for example, where that drill pad is, that axis is in the way. Maybe I can get rid of that. So here's the collar here. That drill pad is at 3,550 meters elevation. The bottom of the camp, or sorry, the bottom of the hill, before we climb the hill with the road, where our camp is about 2,900 meters. So maybe 2,850. I can't remember exactly. So maybe you climbed 700 meters elevation with your road to get to this point. And then, the actual ridge above that is probably another 150 meters, maybe 3,700 meters, the top of the ridge there. So yeah, maybe that gives you an idea of kind of scale and where you are.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at the size. It's hard to, you have something called an apparent dip. So those, if I look at this angle, it looks like those drill holes are pretty steep, but they're actually not that steep. They're minus 52 degrees. So not far off from a 45-degree angle. And again, the idea there is so that you can drill up towards that ridge, which is really the interpreted center of the system and happens to have that hydrothermal breccia. But also, again, you're kind of, as you move laterally, you're gaining depth, so that by the time you hit that breccia, like we just talked about, you're through all that leaching and you're hopefully into some primary mineralization.
And the width extent of the breccia could be greater. So if you say that the strike is along the ridge, basically, which I presume it is,
Yep.
and the width
Yep.
extent of the
More or
breccia
less.
is not entirely clear necessarily, because you're sort of losing. I guess some part of the breccia just goes all the way up, but some could be covered or not completely shown to you at surface. So the breccia system could expand more to the width. Is that a possibility?
For sure, definitely to the. If I just move this over here, sorry, bear with me. I'm trying to be centered on that breccia, and that should disappear. So I've outlined it in red. You can see. Well, I think you can see on the east side here. So now we're looking essentially north or close to north. On the east side, essentially no outcrop, completely covered. And so other than right around the ridge. So for sure there, really along the whole length of it, it could be wider. If you look at the bottom of my screen, where it looks like that breccia jogs kind of to the southeast, we walked in here and we were finding breccia, way kind of far away from what you would consider the middle of the system in terms of the porphyries and the veining and stuff. So yeah, long story short, to your point, that breccia could be much bigger. Typically, they flare upwards, so that as you go deeper, they do kind of get narrower, right? You don't really expect them to blow out at depth. It's actually, it's more of a, an inverted cone. It flares upwards. But what we've seen in the southeast, where there's a bit more exposure, as well as the northwest portion, is it moves pretty far away from that ridge. So I think to your point, certainly on the east side of that ridge, that breccia could continue, and ultimately drilling will help ascertain that.
But point being, so how far we can see the holes here. So with that comment as sort of a side note, when would you expect to encounter the breccias downhole? How?
Yeah, we expect to hit it around, maybe 400 to 450 meters. So that is pretty close. So again, that's why we're deepening the hole, essentially. We'll probably deepen them all, but certainly that first hole has been deepened. We want to see, ideally, you get into the breccia and then you do poke through and see what's on the other side. So again, these are the kinds of things that we call read and react. We obviously keep a very close eye on the drill core as it comes up. And, and sometimes you just have to push it a little deeper. It's part of our budget, really. It's contingency. So yeah, to your point, that's why we're deepening the hole. Get further into that breccia, maybe even poke through it, see what's on the other side. But again, this is an initial test. You don't really want to go out there drilling 1,000-meter holes if you don't have to. You want to kind of figure out what's going on near surface, because that's more important. Ultimately, we want this to be if we have success, this is an open pittable target. But again, you do want to, while you're down there with that drill, you want to get as much information as you can. So I guess we're kind of splitting the difference there. Well, we'll push them deeper, but maybe we won't be going nuts with this because things do get more expensive and slow down as you get deeper downhole.
And this might be an impossible question, but I guess by analogy or something like this. But if you have breccia pipes like this, how, and they might be moderately sort of narrow structures compared to a larger porphyry body or whatever. They might be, I don't know, 50 to 100 meters in width. I'm not sure what you would see usually, but how far vertically could they be displaced from the larger sort of porphyry that might be more expansive but lower grade? Could they be quite close? Sometimes they could be together.
Yeah. So the situation here at El Perdido, and I should have mentioned this, is that we have a porphyry system at surface. So this isn't an example of a breccia being above our target. The target is it's a breccia cutting through a porphyry system.
Yeah.
So maybe, in some cases they can be kind of coeval and co-spatial. But in a lot of cases, like you pointed out, these breccias are above porphyries. And then things can get really complicated where, okay, maybe your original porphyry system formed at a certain level, and then maybe another porphyry system started to form beneath that, and a breccia came off of that. So this breccia could be related to a different porphyry system. I mean, it's, we're talking space and time here, right? So it's a little complex, but again, in this case, this isn't a breccia that's coming off of our target. This is a breccia that's cutting through our target, our porphyry target. So because the porphyry, the high temperature alteration and the veining is at surface.
It's there. Yeah, it's only leached. So basically, I mean, you have the potassic, the propylitic alteration there. So it's not fyllic, i.e. the vertical zonation must be fairly close to where the hopefully economic mineralization is.
Yeah. I mean, typically the fyllic alteration, not always, but the fyllic alteration is grade destructive. Typically, again, not always. So the reason being is that fyllic alteration has a low pH. Things are very acidic, and that's conducive to dissolving sulfides and moving them elsewhere. So you don't want it to be in 500 meters of fyllic alteration. But what we see is potassic alteration preserved at surface. Like there's no fyllic overprint, but for the most case, there's a bit of fyllic overprint. So what it's telling you is you're kind of at the sweet spot where you're at the base of the fyllic alteration that is on top of that and draped around that potassic alteration. But you're at the base, but you're not too deep in the system. So you haven't eroded it. I guess the way to put it is your erosional level, modern day right now, it's allowed you to preserve the potential of a big, tall porphyry system, which is important, right? So you haven't eroded it deeply, but you're not dealing with a bunch of dead rock that you got to get through to get there. So
I guess what I'm hoping or what I'm trying to convey is that it's not the case here, as you said, that this is a stacked morphology where the breccia pipe is on top of the potential, larger ore body. You could encounter economic mineralization sooner downhole than when you expect to project into the breccia pipe. It's basically.
Of course. Oh yeah. No, that's the plan. That's the goal. That's we're targeting right out of the gate early porphyries with high quartz vein density. And then ultimately, in this case, the breccia would be a bonus if it looks good. It's not the target in and of itself. It's just part of the whole thing, part of the whole drill hole, part of the whole system. But no, there's potential from collar to hundreds, if not thousands of meters down. We just got to see who the grade is.
And the logistics here. So you have one pad. Are you able to? And you'll complete 3 holes. So you start drilling on the 20th. You have probably 2.5 months, fair to say, 10 weeks.
Yeah. I think we'd be, typically mid-April. Yeah. That's when snow starts coming up. So yeah. There's no to get that minimum 1,500 meters. There's no, crunch on as far as time. But again, we do want to drill more if it warrants it. So we're trying to move quickly, but for sure the minimum 1,500 meters, no problem. And then if we have success, it's just a matter of, well, drill as much as you can before you're chased out by the weather.
And you have 3 holes. What's the approximate distance between these holes, sort of end of color, horizontal distance between them, or something like that? Just to give a sense of what the sort of the area which you're able to triangulate within.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so probably about 250 meters, maybe. By the time you get to the bottom, that's how far away they are. That's maybe 300. It's somewhere in there, 250 to 300. So
And that's
you
between.
are getting some separation, but again, the general idea, or maybe I haven't mentioned it, but a key idea anyway to the design of these holes is that we can see as we're moving north and moving south, and moving east, how things are changing, which allows us to vector, because it's not always as simple as rolling in and hitting it right out of the gate. Sometimes these porphyry systems can take time to locate. So that's the idea with those, is that if you're working from a constant known point, then you can see, well, maybe we're getting closer to the guts of it as we move north, or as we move southwest or southeast, I should say. So yeah, that's something that's worth mentioning.
So geochem and sort of alteration, all of these things, gradient, 300 meters of strike, basically, is what you'll have downhole if you don't go deeper. That is.
Of strike, you'd be looking at closer to 600
Okay,
meters.
so it's 600 between the north and south.
Exactly, yeah. So it's 250 to
each hole. Yeah.
Between each hole, 250 to 300. So maybe you're 500 meters of strike, something like that. And obviously, if we deepen the holes, you're getting that number goes up. Yeah.
Okay, that's very good. And would you have time? So let's say you complete these holes. Would you have time to build another pad or capacity to do that, to step out on strike or whatever, do something, or is that unlikely?
Yeah. No, that's we have certainly the capacity and the permission. It's just time is your only. That's what you're working against. Well, weather. But yeah, no, that's really kind of part of the plan. If we have success, is to start moving around.
And then you just talk a bit about the drill contractor. I know they're based in Mendoza. James mentioned before. Do you have prior experience with these guys? A bad drill contractor can blow an exploration program. So just talk a bit more on that.
Yeah, no, I personally don't. This is my first program with them, but I was they were highly recommended. These are really the owners. They're actually the same guys who originally founded Energold Drilling. So they've taken a drill company and through to sell to a bigger drill company, and now they're kind of doing it again. So the owners they've been doing this for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And it's a very tight operation. They're very conscious in terms of the environmental aspects. We've had multiple inspections from the government. They're very impressed. The site looks great. They're very professional. Yeah. So, and the price is pretty good. So no, we're very happy with Connoisseur. It just so happens that, they're based in Mendoza, but really most of the drill companies in Argentina are based in Mendoza, because Mendoza is like, there's a big industrial area and there's lots of space, and that's kind of where the action is. So, even a lot of the companies drilling in San Juan, or even down all the way down to Santa Cruz to the south, they are based in Mendoza, which is good for us. But no, very happy with Connoisseur. Good drilling rates, professional. Everything's neat and tidy, and the government's very happy. So we're very happy with them.
And we did cover with James sort of the unit costs, and I think most of our viewers are familiar with what it can cost in the Andes. With the Vicuña district, many investors have familiarity, and it's more expensive there. The unit costs are higher. So, and you're responsible for logistics here. Can you just make a bit of a wider point on the logistical situation in Mendoza? Are you able to scale easily here? Add more rigs?
For sure, absolutely.
You just cover this as an interesting point, I think.
Yeah. No, that's part of the plan. Depending on how things go, is that we can scale up. We can bring in another drill. Our camp is modular in the sense that you can just add pieces, and the operators of that camp have done a good job. So that is kind of the plan. If things go well, let's ramp it up and get as much done as we can this year. So that has always been the plan. And, there's some upfront costs here with the program if you're going to factor in like an all-in cost. So if drilling is 160 to 170 dollars per meter hard cost at the drill, but the all-in cost is maybe 5 to 600, maybe even 650 US per meter all in. But that's because you're including the cost of building that road, you're including mobilization, you're including construction of the camp and associated mobilization with that. So the long and short of it is what I'm getting at is the more you drill, the more that average cost goes down. So really that's what you're hoping for, is that you have success and you can ramp it up. And then all that upfront work and time and money, you start to claw some of that back.
And then I guess, subject to extreme weather conditions, I'm not sure how that can happen. But how much of those fixed costs in terms of road building, camp, and so on are not sunk, or sort of costs that will recur each exploration season? I think the road will be mostly operable after, in the next season. You have to go and bulldoze again and do the same work again, basically.
Yeah. So we have the option. So for sure, the road there's road maintenance, with graders and but that's nominal. That's not much. So 95% of the costs that it took you to build the road and all that work, that's that lasts forever. And the camp, we have the option to keep the camp there over the winter. So again, you wouldn't have to remobilize it. You don't have to take it down and take it back to Mendoza City and reconstruct it the next year. So that's not a huge problem if we get chased out by the weather and things are going good and we want to obviously keep going. The road stays there, the camp stays there. You come back, you clear it out when spring shows up again and you're off to the races. So that's what we're hoping for, is that's the case. And in that case, again, all those costs just get averaged down.
And you would expect, next season that will be probably late October, early November. There wouldn't be too many activities to delay that.
So October. I mean, even this year, let me put it this way: in September, there was actually we were very close to having a September start. There was really no snow at the beginning of September, so it hadn't really snowed much at all over the course of the winter. Sometimes there's just not a lot of precipitation in this part of the world. But then there was kind of a freak weather event that went, right in mid to late September, that dumps actually about a couple feet of snow. So that was a bummer, but so that we did have to wait for that to melt. Ultimately, we were in mid-October, we were working our way, clearing out the road. You just have these pockets, these drifts of snow that kind of pile up because of the wind. But in answer to your point or your question, early October, certainly doable. That's what we would plan around is an early October start.
Okay. I think this covers El Perdido quite well. I think we've given a good account. So I think we'll jump to the next segment with good old Paul as well, and he'll introduce himself, and we'll talk El Destino and sort of the wider exploration efforts that you have underway here as well. So.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. No, he'll be looking forward to it. He's got lots to talk about.
Okay, so we just chatted through El Perdido with Rory, and obviously both Rory and James has mentioned Mr. Paul Johnston. They speak very highly of him, and he's here with us now. So I thought before we get into the sort of the other targets across the Landpackage, couldn't you tell us a bit about yourself, Paul, and why you wanted to work with this little junior after your long career with a major, gaining massive experience, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I started my career as a mine geologist at a gold mine in Ontario. That led to my PhD in the deposit there, which got me interested in porphyry systems worldwide. I left the mine to work for Teck. I was with them for 18 years, and that took me to a lot of porphyry districts, in addition to China and Australia, where we were involved with base metal exploration. But most recently, I was chief geoscientist for South America for Tech. That gave me an opportunity to work in Argentina, Chile, and Peru on predominantly porphyry exploration, but also a little bit of epithermal gold systems as well. What attracted me to Kobrea was really just their land package in an area that really had not seen a lot of serious exploration for quite a number of years. Mendoza was always anti-mining. They really weren't a friendly place to get permits, and that all changed. And now we're in a position where we can explore large tracts of land with a lot of targets and a few defined porphyry systems to move very quickly to advance those to drilling stages. And it's in a well-known part of the crust that hosts some of the biggest porphyry systems in the world, such as El Teniente and Los Bronces, Rio Blanco, as well as Los Palambres. So it's a unique opportunity, certainly was for me at this stage in my career, to become involved with a pretty dynamic group of people in an exceptional piece of the Earth's crust to hopefully discover some large porphyry systems.
Perfect. And before we take a look at the sort of the larger data set and so on, I'm just curious to understand. I mean, obviously you've been working here now for a few seasons. You've been moving forward, looking at a bunch of targets. Can you just talk us through sort of what's the methodology to discriminate quickly? I take it you have a lot of experience seeing what projects look like. You know what to cut off early, and you just explain how are you able to, with a big land package, really find new targets swiftly and sort of do this within a reasonable time frame.
Sure. Well, the first thing to understand is because this is a new area, we're not looking deep. A lot of these systems are exposed, so we just go to them and look at them. But the criteria for discriminating which are the ones that deserve our time and which are the ones don't is really quite simple. It's are they large enough? Does the hydrothermal footprint look big enough to host the kinds of things we're looking for? We're not looking for small little veinlets. We're looking for large volumes of altered rock. And does that hydrothermal footprint show evidence of copper? So it's a simple matter of getting out to them and looking at them, assessing the styles of alteration and mineralization, and then deciding if the features that we see exposed on the ground justify further work.
Right, and you've married that, which we can show now, with regional data sets, geophysics, and so on. So maybe we can take a look at that as a primer before we dig into some of the key sort of runner-up targets beyond El Perdido.
Yeah, absolutely. So the package itself, the 730 square kilometers, it already had some targets defined to various levels of certainty. So there were, I think, 16 identified targets that had historical geochemical work that indicated mineralization. Since then, Kobrea has invested in a magnetic survey that covers the whole land package. And also, we commissioned an ASTER study. This is a satellite that no longer functions, but all the data is available for free. And we commissioned an expert at processing that data to look for evidence of hydrothermal alteration. So with those two data sets, it allows us to not only look at the existing targets, but we've also been identifying new areas that are also adding to a list of targets that we'd like to develop. And that is married with the regional geology maps that are available for Argentina. So together, those three data sets are helping us understand what each target that's been identified, how the quality of them, if you want to call it that. And then also, as we're working through and traveling through the areas to get to those already identified targets, it gives us an opportunity to look at new things and evaluate, say, color anomalies that we can see. And that's already been useful in adding to our list of targets to evaluate.
Okay, so I think it makes most sense to start with El Destino. Obviously, it's been mentioned previously by both Rory and James. and it's been talked up before, and I think some people are decently familiar with it. But you've had some new movement there in this exploration season, so I thought we would do a bit of a refresh and really go through why you think this is emerging as a really solid target.
Yeah, absolutely. I just returned yesterday from a almost 2.5 week field program of mapping this at a scale of 1 to 2,000 with our geological team. There are some significant changes that we noticed in the project area. What you're seeing here is a historical map that was prepared, I think, in 2014. It was probably done fairly quickly. It's fairly crude geology. Our more detailed work has substantially changed the look of things. For one, we've been able to more accurately define the cover. If you look at those gray units that surround the yellows and oranges and pinks, we can see that those are the cover sequences that are post-mineral, so they cover up the system. But significantly, what we found is, and what we're able to map, is the intensity of alteration that we see. We've been able to put limits on some of that hydrothermal alteration. And we also found that the majority of the underlying rocks is not volcanics, as indicated there, but a large volume intrusion, diorite composition, echogranular, that in many cases, these things are considered to be precursors to the porphyries. So I think it's enhanced the geological setting for the alteration that has been defined, and it also helps us and gives us confidence that the actual the system is not fully exposed. In other words, the cover to the north, it hides a lot of the deposit. We're still in the process of compiling all that data. Like I said, we just came out of the field a couple of days ago, and we still have a fair bit of work to compile all our mapping. But right off the bat, we can see that we're really only exposing a part of the system. The alteration that we see continues right up to the limit of or the cover, which is an unconformity with the underlying rocks. The other thing that we can see, of course, is the ages are all important, the relative ages, and we know that these rocks that host the alteration are Miocene. Most of the deposits on the Chilean side are in the order of 4 million to 13 million years old, which puts them in the Pliocene. So we're certainly looking in the same time band at El Destino as we see in these other examples of mineralization on the Chile side. We also noticed a lot more brecciation, a lot of bodies of hydrothermal brecciation, which is another characteristic of porphyry systems in this region. We found a lot of porphyry systems distributed across the property, but more importantly, distributed through time. We can see the relative ages of these hydrothermal breccias, both early and intermineral in timing, and that opens up the possibility for some interesting higher grade mineralization, which is often associated with these breccia events. In terms of the alteration, what we found was the intensity of alteration is maintained all the way through where it's exposed and all the way up to the northern cover, which suggests that, of course, the alteration system is going to continue underneath that cover, and that's something we'll take a very close look at with our recently acquired magnetic data. These are just a couple of photographs of deveining in the host rocks. The one on the left is a photograph of an early mineral porphyry with an intense quartz vein stockwork, and then an example of one of the breccias where you can see a lot of iron oxide material in between the clasts. I should point out in this area, you can see the yellow rocks in the upper right photograph. They're all characteristic of the phyllic alteration that's exposed quite widely across the property. And then you can see the The gray tones are the pyroclastic cover. That's post-mineral cover that hides everything to the north. The little red star there is where that sample of deveining is located. That's the last exposure before we hit the cover, but you can see in that photograph that the strong alteration is maintained all the way up to where we can see. So that's pretty encouraging for us to know that we're looking at a portion of the system, and we'll figure out ways to explore underneath that cover in the most efficient, cost-effective way as we go forward. The other aspect of this is the strong veining that we see throughout the project. The previous maps really didn't give much of an indication of where that occurred, but we've spent a fair bit of time actually doing vein intensity or density maps, recording how much of the rock is occupied by veinlets. These are just some examples of some veining that we've picked up across the property. So in porphyry lingo, the important veins to us are the quartz veinlets. They often carry and introduce a lot of the copper. We map those, but we also monitor the D veins, which is a late stage hydrothermal event that can also tell us where the center of the system is. And that's really the whole point of our work, is to try to figure out where that center is, because that is expected to be the best mineralized part of the large hydrothermal system. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're dealing with kilometer scale geological features here. These alteration systems have affected large volumes of rock, and already we're seeing something in the order of a 2 by 1 kilometer exposure of hydrothermal alteration.
So basically, you're seeing it's preserved is what I'm hearing. For one, vertically, it's sort of placed fairly nicely, and you're also seeing exposure or evidence for more lateral sort of expansion of alteration beneath the cover. So it's even larger than what you see on surface currently.
That's exactly it. We speak of this as a window through the cover that's been eroded, so we can see what's there. But all the evidence we have so far indicates that the system is continuing underneath that cover to the north. We've closed it off to the south, which is helpful in understanding the overall geometry, but certainly the cover to the north. This is an ignimbrite that was deposited in the Pleistocene. That's covered up a lot of the system.
So what would be the next steps to be able to? I mean, it's already quite big. Is it not big enough? I mean, do you need to know how far it extends beneath the cover before you sort of say, okay, we're going to move on, trying to zoom in on a specific area in this big alteration sort of footprint, where we try to drill? Or what's the next steps really to advance or decide?
Well, I think at the moment, yes, it is quite big. And what we're really trying to determine is, where is the overall center? The way the geology looks after our field work is that we're exposing the southern edge of something. And so we would like to try to track that underneath the cover, and ideally place drill holes where we think the center of the action is. Right now, it looks like we're on the southern edge of that. Our next step is really the immediate step is to get all our field work plotted and see how that compares with our magnetic data, and then we can start to make decisions on where the undercover drilling can take place. But we already know the attractive areas where it's exposed, where we would like to put some drill holes to test the subsurface. The other thing I need to point out is that this is it's a very leached area, and the leaching has affected the rocks by removing virtually all the sulfides that were originally deposited. What we see now are we do see sulfides in the creek bottoms, but if you just move 5 meters above that, the rocks are completely leached. And I think that has something to do with the pre-glacial history and the pre-ignimbrite history of the deposit. But we really have two things that have removed mineralization. The first is strong phyllic alteration, which in general strips away all the copper. It's not a kind event for preserving the original mineralization that is normally deposited during the potassic events. And then on top of that, we have the weathering that also removes any sulfides. So all we see in the surface above where the active drainages are just casts of pyrite mostly. But we do know we're looking right now at a very intense phyllically altered zone that's most certainly affected the earlier mineralization events.
And this might be a stupid question, but beneath the cover sequence, would you still expect the weathering effect to have been active beneath that cover sequence in the timing of things?
Definitely. These post-mineral cover rocks are not very old. Yeah. So there was a lot of time, probably quite a few million years of weathering and erosion that's affected the rocks before that cover was laid down. That cover would then effectively protect any further weathering and erosion since those ignimbrites were erupted and covered everything up.
So I guess the question becomes, because the thickness of the cover obviously impacts the potential viability of whatever is beneath it economically. So is there any way for you to figure out the thickness beyond drilling, any geophysical method, or how would you go about doing that? We don't expect it to be that thick. You can see in the photographs overlooking the project area, there is a what we would call a paleotopography. That would be a topography that existed before the eruption of those ignimbrites. But we're probably looking at something in the order of 50 to 100 meters thick, not accounting for erosional valleys that existed before the eruption occurred. So here, that picture again in the upper right shows the exposure of the exposure of the actual alteration in the yellow tones, and then off to the left near that red star is all the pyroclastic cover. So we've got pretty good control. We can see on the topography how thick that is. They form a plateau above where that red star is. But the thing to remember is that the paleotopography is not planar. It undulates, and it will continue to undulate underneath that cover. But at this time, I don't see any real impediment to drilling through that material and hitting the rocks underneath that are interesting to us. Like, we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of meters of cover. Like I said, it looks like it's going to be in between 50 and 100 meters of that ignimbrite cover. So you have a general north vector, if this is oriented north, I'm not sure, but upwards in this image. You think you're on the southern margin of a bigger alteration footprint, basically. But you also mentioned, so you'll compile the data, etc. What are the next steps to move towards drilling? You said you have a couple of ideas, presumably on the exposed parts of the system, but you have also a general vector thinking the center probably is beneath cover, essentially.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, we'll go for the obvious stuff first, the easiest stuff first, and we have mapped. What really works well is looking at the intensity of quartz veinlet development across the property, and using that as a guide to fracturing that occurred during the hopefully mineral deposition. So we quantify that by looking at every outcrop we can find and making measurements, just visual measurements of the percent volume of the exposed rock that's occupied by veinlets. That quantifies where the more intense fracturing has occurred. And just to put it in context, that can range anywhere from zero, obviously, but we've detected areas on the exposed part that are reaching 30% by volume quartz veining. Those are attractive areas to look at for drilling in the subsurface, because that is where you would expect the best mineralization to be located, is where the highest degree of fracturing and veining has occurred. This is early stage veining, what we call usually A veins is what most geologists will label those types of features.
Right. And basically, the beneath cover, the only thing you really can do is to probably after you've had a few successful holes, hopefully under those areas you have exposed, you would then start to sort of track that under the cover, hopefully, or something like this.
Exactly, and we're fortunate to have this new magnetic data set that now that we've seen the rocks and we know what we're dealing with, we can start to correlate what we've seen on surface, and you can see in places where it's blue tone, those are areas where the rock has had its magnetism reduced or destroyed. Phyllic alteration tends to remove magnetite, which is really in a simple way what magnetism or magnetic surveys are measuring and mapping. We can see now where that's occurred with real observations. Before we were in the field, we were just going on historical reports. But now we can take a very close look at the magnetic response that we have from our survey and start to correlate where the possible centers of the system might be. Knowing now what the host rocks are and knowing what the alteration is like, we have a much better chance of getting that right. Now that we have really a ground truth on our maps and how that correlates with the magnetic response. So that will be an important part of our decisions for where we decide to put drill holes underneath the cover.
Okay, I think that's a good place to leave El Destino. Good target. Sounds like it can be competitive with El Perdido. We'll see. I guess the drill will figure that out, but it certainly sounds like it's very worthwhile drilling. So that's great. I guess we should move on, and I think the next target up and running here is KBX17, which you released a news release just yesterday, so on the 3rd of February here, I think. So let's talk about that one.
Sure. I'll just let Rory get some figures here up on the map. So we were able to get in here just before Christmas and complete this map. This is completely new. We were admittedly quite surprised. It really didn't match the regional geology that was done quite a few years ago. But to back up a little bit, we noticed this color anomaly that centered on KBX17 while we were looking in the area at a target back in our first campaign. That would have been in probably late February of 2025. We noticed from the access track into that target a color anomaly here. We had a bit of time. We spent a day looking around. We were looking north of the current target, but we did notice a little bit of copper mineralization, and it looked like an attractive area to go look. So we planned this campaign just before Christmas. We had a couple of weeks of mapping to take a look at that, and we were very surprised to see this hydrothermal breccia that's exposed at the top of the mountain, and shown here in this pink or magenta color, that's hosted by again an equigranular diorite. Neither of these rock units were indicated on any historical data, and this wasn't a target that was identified in the target set that was provided by the people who optioned the property to us. So Rory here is showing some in the magnetic signature here. I believe that it didn't have much of an aster response. There is a little bit around the edges, but the geology explains why that is. There really isn't any phyllic alteration or hydrolytic alteration that would respond to to an Aster sensor. So this was really completely geological in identifying it. The target, as we described it in the news release, is it's in the order of 1.2 kilometers by about 600 kilometers across. It's a very obvious breccia and also very leached. The current form of the breccia is a lot of pieces of that diorite, that's that orange unit, and they're really cemented by iron oxides, by quite abundant iron oxides that from some of the exposures we see, we interpret as being pyritic. So our approach here was to map out that limit and also get as many samples of the hydrothermal breccias as we could in the time that we had. And the idea with that was to see if we could detect any anomalous copper throughout that breccia. And we were successful in demonstrating that yes, there is copper throughout that breccia. They're fairly low numbers because of the leaching. If there were any copper sulfides in there, they've now been probably stripped. A lot of the copper has been stripped out by weathering, and now we're just looking at residual iron oxides. That's that very dark brown material that you see in between the light colored clasts. The upper left picture there gives you a sense of the scale of these exposures. There's one of our geologists is taking a sample of that particular outcrop. It's pretty rough terrain, but that means that we can get a pretty good handle on the breccia. I should add too that wherever we could identify it, the contacts of that hydrothermal breccia look vertical. So the natural thing for us to think about is that, if this is a hydrothermal breccia related to a porphyry system, quite often they can be zoned, they can be pyritic at the top, and then move into other copper sulfide species at depth, and that's something that you see in many systems in this region, including the Los Bronces systems. The part of that called Los Sulfados has a very well-zoned breccia that has exactly that pattern from pyrite dominant into chalcopyrite dominant breccia, and then that breccia is coming off of a much larger porphyry system at depth. So that, from what we can see at the moment, all the things look positive and interesting. It certainly can be worked up to a drill target. I think that the level of weathering is something that we can use to plan an IP survey, which will hopefully help us zoom in on whether there is sulfide at a fairly shallow depth, and then plan drilling based on that response. Off to a good start there, and we'll work through that to plan our next steps and work out where the best way to drill is.
Okay, I mean, it's very good to see a target emerge over the course of literally 2.5 months, like that, and so you feel like you need to do IP basically, and if that looks positive as well, then is there anything else you can do really at this target before you try to, or you obviously consider all other drill targets and decide if this one stacks up, competes with those, but then it will be time to drill basically.
Yeah, we can move this along while also evaluating the other ones. What we'd like to do is reduce the risks of really getting a hole in the wrong place, and understanding this as much as we can with geophysical techniques. So I think what surprised us was the size of this breccia, this exposed breccia, and seeing that it's been in place without anybody really mapping it out, and then having a clear hydrothermal breccia character to it, so that this thing could be essentially like a chimney above a porphyry system, and both the geophysics and then subsequent drilling should be able to tell us whether it's within reach of mining. that would be the strategy we take for drilling it.
And the magnetic signature that you showcased earlier, at what depth was that slice?
I think that could have been the 300. We have a variety of slices that that we've used. I'm not sure what that one.
Yeah, sorry, I'll jump in. That this is actually a different data set. That it's quite deep. So this is a 2,000 meter elevation slice of the magnetization vector intensity. So, this is almost 1,000 meters below surface. Probably not the best data set, but that's what I had loaded up.
Okay.
Generally, what you see on the shallower magnetics is really one large 4 by 2 kilometer anomaly that aligns with that diorite unit that we were showing in orange there.
Right. Okay, so that's an interesting target. So I guess next steps, just to digest the data as it comes in, maybe do some more surface work, but it sounds like you've done what you can perhaps, and then do the IP and see if there's indication of sulfides a bit deeper. Then we'll see if this stacks up against targets like El Destino and perhaps what the others will talk about.
That's correct, yeah.
So I guess the next one, you want to add something else, Paul?
No. That will give us everything that we need to plan a drill program once we get the IP data, which is a fairly straightforward survey to complete.
Okay. And we had Tibercio we want to discuss as well. I know little about this target. I haven't heard much about it, but I'll let you guys talk it through, and I'll see if I can ask some prudent follow-up questions.
Okay. Well, we don't know much about it either. It was a target that was delivered through the people who optioned the properties to us. Our people have had a look at a distance, and it certainly is a compelling color anomaly. These are usually reflective of hydrothermal alteration. And so it's a target that we've been trying to get to. It's probably one of the more difficult ones because of its distance from existing roads. It's going to involve about a day of horseback riding to get into it. But we became more interested in this as a result of our work on Aster, and also, more importantly, the magnetic data that we've acquired. So, Rory, just to remind people, can you just put your cursor over the primary Tibercio target, and then there's another target that's just to the west as well that make up two individual targets for Tibercio. But let's focus on the main Tibercio target. You can see right away that it encloses a what happened to it? Sorry about that. You can see that there's a magnetic anomaly that is really just off center of that target. There's some topographically around the outer edges of the red line that defines the target are the higher ridges that have some anomalism in the aster. So it looks like what we're interpreting at the moment is that we're seeing a halo, if you will, of phyllic alteration surrounding that magnetic high. That magnetic high is situated in what topographically looks like a cirque, and that's quite common in erosion in the Andes. That the rocks that are weakened by hydrothermal alteration often get ground out and form these little alpine basins or cirques. That's a pretty good image where you can see the topography with the red blobs there are where the aster responses are coming from. So it's a fairly straightforward program that we've got planned. As soon as I get back next week, our crews will go in there and we'll map this and look for the alteration if it's there, and we'll be able to look at the rock types and hopefully find ideally porphyry intrusions and alteration that's associated with those. And it's just a pretty straightforward workup from where the alteration is and where we think the action is going to occur. And then, like with other targets, we'll work through other programs. If we do get attractive response from our field work, then we can start thinking about geophysics. But as it stands now, it looks like it's big enough. It looks like it has the interesting magnetic signature that we think relates to a porphyry complex. And the truth will be in when we get out there and actually see what the rocks look like. There was no geochemistry with this particular target, so we don't have that to go on, but certainly our programs always involve taking lots of outcrop samples to get an idea if there is copper in the system. So, like as I said right at the beginning, it has, at first sight, the size. We don't know if it has copper associated with it, but we'll be testing that when we get out there next week.
And just for reference, what is the scale across in that the blob towards the middle upward?
Rory can measure that. The long.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. They're all about 2.5 kilometers across those.
Okay.
Those target outlines. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I guess you'll execute that before end of season now. So we'll hopefully get this thing to a similar stage as KBX 17, hopefully, or something. I mean, so confirm a bit more what's going on.
Yeah, well, actually, our plans are to our field crews are on a break right now. They come back on the 10th, and we'll be going straight in there when they get back. 10th of February. Right. And that should take us about 2 weeks to do that target and the one next to it.
Okay. And we had also marked down Cajon Chico, which you want to talk about as well. Also one that I hadn't heard about before, so presumably something that's emerging, which will be interesting to hear about.
Yeah, now we were able to get there, just spent 2 days. It involved quite a long hike from the road that you see in red. And it probably has the strongest propylitic alteration on the southern side that we've seen in any of the targets so far. There is some hydrothermal brecciation. We found quite a large block of hydrothermal breccia that wasn't in place. There was a large piece of float, probably pushed down by some earlier alpine glaciers. That was very interesting. But what we really need to do is get to where that really coherent block of red is, which is a response from sericite in the aster work. So that's going to involve a little bit of horseback riding to get into that drainage that's immediately east of it, that splits the eastern half of the target area. There is a little bit of copper anomalism in the historical geochemistry, but really this involves like the same approach that we take on many of them, is to just get in and look and see what the alteration is, map it out to see if it has the size, and sample it to try to find evidence of copper mineralization associated with that alteration. So once again, we'll be able to do that this season. We want to get Tibercio done first, and then we'll approach this one and see what it all looks like. But from what we've seen so far, there is enough encouragement to complete that work. In all of our targets, we do set priorities on them and work through those priorities for as long as we can while the weather holds up. So that's about all I can say about that at the moment. It's like others, it's a straightforward piece of geological work and exploration to just define the size and to get evidence that there's copper in the hydrothermal system.
Okay. Yeah, it's not too much more for me to ask there, but it's intriguing. I guess what I'm sort of curious to understand is, it's always important with porphyry, certainly, but all geological sort of endeavors to collect data properly. So you cannot scale up the amount of people running around collecting rocks and doing work too quickly, I take it. But you have a big land package. So how do you think about that, Paul? How do you sort of manage this? Because I know that, big land package, can Kobrea work all this up themselves, or do you joint venture this with sort of an inject people from a major to assist with doing work, or how would you think about this? Is this feasible? Does it take 2 or 3 more seasons to sort of work the land package up properly to know what's who's who in the zoo in terms of porphyries here?
Yeah, it's certainly feasible for us to do it. We're trying to avoid building a huge team. We want to build a manageable team that does high quality work. That involves a little bit of training and professional development from the geologists that we have working with us. We know from years and years of exploration history that small dedicated hunting teams are the ones that succeed, and large, difficult to manage groups. Yeah, sure, you can cover a lot of ground, but you may not actually find things. You're more susceptible to missing stuff. It actually goes pretty fast. This project here, like for example, Cajon Chico, we're not going to really schedule more than a week in doing that, and we have a growing experience with working with the logistics in the area to get in and out very quickly. So yeah, I have no concerns about being able to get this, but we need to do it right. There's no point in putting in a whole bunch of people that just miss the important things. And we know from the previous exploration here that some critical features were missed, and we don't want to make that mistake. If it takes a week or 2 weeks to get through an individual target, usually if it takes longer, it means it's a more attractive target. We know pretty quickly if it's not worth much time. We can assess that within a few days. If it looks good, then we'll dedicate more time and resources to actually delimiting the size of the alteration system and getting the sampling that we need done.
So basically, to summarize, I mean, by next exploration season, you could at least have one or two of these targets we discussed now beyond El Perdido drill ready. El Destino sounds like that's basically there. You have some good ideas that could be competitive with the continuing on El Perdido, but the other targets, feasibly, you could have access to some of them and perhaps consider drilling, or do you think it would take a bit more time for those targets?
Oh no! I mean, El Destino is moving along very quickly. We have the information now to be able to plan our next steps, and our whole concept is to develop a pipeline where we've always got a project on deck to be drilled. And as you could see, the project at KBX 17 is really, once the geophysical work is done there, that will also trigger our decisions to drill or not to drill. And then the rest of the season, we have quite a few targets that we expect to get. We expect to get investigated, evaluated, and not all of them are going to turn into drill targets. But we can certainly build that pipeline out as we go along. So we've got early stage evaluations going on, and as you've seen with El Perdido, which is being drilled right now, we're really running that in parallel with our target development work that I'm involved with.
Right, perfect. I think that's a good place to end the conversation. Looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with the first few holes, El Perdido and so on. But I'm sure we'll discuss some of these other emerging targets in greater detail as more information is accrued in the coming year or so. So thank you, Paul, for your time, and we'll hand it over to James again to close things off. So James, we've heard both Paul and Rory and Paul talk about the geology and go through everything and convey the strength of the targets and the strategy, sort of exploration strategy and so on. But from your point of view, again, we discussed a bit in the beginning. You have a large land package. Could you just describe your baseline multi-year strategy here? You have these two main targets, El Perdido and El Destino. then you have probably like 20 or something other potential porphyry centers. And we know, it costs several tens of millions of US dollars to get a transactable porphyry project for acquisition, at least presentable to a major. You can JV earlier, but you cannot really sell something before you spent quite a bit of money. So, i.e., you probably as a company couldn't drill more than 3 projects likely yourself, in my opinion. But maybe you have a different view.
No, I think you're right. It's at least for the initial kind of, if you take it into from, we're in the end of year 1 of having this, or mid year 1. So it's kind of a 3-year plan. So I have 2 years left. And that's what I wanted the $10 million for, as I explained earlier. The strategy is to make that initial discovery ourselves, and then move into, if that doesn't, then we still have the underpinned value. We've worked up the other targets. There's a number of other targets, and that's where we'd look into the more optionality. We have a bunch of options with, selling portion of the project, or maybe the central kind of Cuprum trend pipeline, or one of the El Perdido or El Destino. Obviously, best case scenario, pretty easy to worry about. You make a discovery, you go as fast as you can, hit it as hard as you can, and sell it. Worst case scenario, we step through the projects, we get a number of smoke, a bunch of smoke, and then we have to recapitalize. I would probably presumably go to depending on the market cap and the share price, go to the market or go to the majors for some assistance in capital. But it's all options on the table. It's a big land package, so the idea is to step through it ourselves. We're very confident. I'm very confident in the crews. We have the capital to see it through the first few years without dilution, without limiting the upside. That's what I worry about with an early major kind of structure in terms of prospect generation. You're limiting the upside. You are putting a floor in the stock for sure, but you're at this point we're a $30 million Canadian market cap. It's relatively low for the land package we have with the capital we have to explore. So right now, I think our investors would rather not cap their upside and let us see our kind of 2 to 2.5 year plan through.
Right. So I mean, it's like you definitely have interest from majors, and now obviously you cannot tell me who they are or how advanced these discussions are, but I think that's very fair to say. There's history with these projects. I do recall that there was competition to acquire this land package with some large companies, and you were able to sort of tackle them out miraculously. So you have that there. So you have that option probably to do that now if you wanted to. Perhaps even there will be interest to finance on an equity level, but I would take you would want a discovery first, then consider that, and perhaps with the equity investment also partner with that company on parts of the land package or something like this. Or would that be sort of an idealized situation to have?
Yeah, and I think you made a good point. On the equity side, if it was just straight equity, I think that would be, this is obviously very forward looking. If there's, heavy interest, the equity side would be something that would be much more palatable in the near term. In terms of at least the way we're thinking right now, in terms of making a discovery, I'd like to do that without giving up percentage of the project at this point before we JV it. But the mining business is all about deals, and I can't say no to anything. But yeah, I think a straight equity investment would be a palatable thing for everyone right now, or in the near term, I should say. But yeah, no, it's been good, and there's been interest from not just majors, but all sorts of people in the mining industry that want to know the story. So it shows me that people believe there's potential in Mendoza, and that's good. So it's up to us to kind of make sure that we are leading the charge to make this actual an exploration district that not just us but other companies can come in and have success.
And obviously deal flow is ramping up. There's more capital, alternative capital source available to juniors as well. So majors have to be a bit more, they cannot be as steamrolling as they might have been 2 or 3 years ago now. So, and also you have a nice federal story with Argentina, you have the big land package and so on. So basically you think that you can improve your negotiating position by perhaps making, obviously a discovery at El Perdido, that would reflect well on the other porphyry centers close by potentially. And also you gathering baseline data to further hierarchize the targets across that land package. But I guess the question is for me, do you have enough time to do that this field season to some extent? Or would you require the next field season of miscellaneous work across all of the the big project area to be able to get there? Or how would you think about that?
Yeah. So I think we'll do a good job of working up a number of targets this season, like outside of El Perdido, El Destino, which we're already kind of identified and mapped. So we're updating the mapping, obviously. But we'll have a number of others, 3, 4, that are nicely mapped and sampled with a comprehensive geologic map. We have the mag data for it. We'll have the astro data to kind of buttress some of our ideas. But yeah, no, we're not going to have every single one of them worked up this season, but we don't need to. I mean, 30 is a lot. Obviously, some of them, in full disclosure, some of them we've gone to and said, no, this is not big enough, and the alteration is not intense enough, so we're not going to spend too much time mapping these. That's only happened a couple times so far, but yeah, no, it's not. We don't need to get all 30 up and then say, oh, here's a portfolio of 30 projects. It's something that eventually, being a large land package, even with the discovery, you will need. This is major country. This is ground that is best suited to develop by majors, but I think it's best suited to explore by juniors. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you, sort of to say it more succinctly, do you think after this field season, you think you're able to, collect enough data to where the third order and downward targets are fairly transactable potentially? At least you can convey target 3, 4, 5, 6 their merits to a major, and they can at least sort of get on the same level with you on that.
Yeah, I think we'll have a number of targets that are very, very nice and merit drilling. It's just we've got to make sure that we go through 1, 2, 3 and not just drill them all at once. But it's absolutely, that's the plan, is to get a number of these in our portfolio that are appropriately, that we could pitch and we could show people in a presentation. Target 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then and that, like you said earlier in the interview, it kind of adds that value to the company that a lot of juniors wouldn't have, because they don't. I know a lot of juniors have gone out and got big land package, and that's the reason. Is you need to underpin value with something and not just have a small land package with one porphyry that it's a very binary. It's going up or it's going right down to the bottom. But we have a large amount of porphyries underpinning value in Kobrea right now.
And then just to close things off, so if we speak in the beginning of 2029, which we both hopefully intend on doing, what would you like to have accomplished at that point? What do you think is a likely outcome?
Well, I think a likely outcome is, so you're talking 3 years from today.
Yeah.
I would say I would like to have Kobrea 2 on the books in terms of this land package. So we've made a discovery. We're not going to push it to the maximum Lausanne curve and get to that development kind of rollover. I would like to sell it midway up that curve to a major, recapitalize, obviously all the investors, but create a secondary company for the rest of the assets so we can be continually exploring. I think that's a realistic term of 3 years to make a discovery. We'll probably have drilled 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 of the targets that we're working up, but that would be the goal. That's the goal of the company, is to make a discovery, increase the value so that we're in a better position to negotiate with major companies, and then obviously work on optionality of optioning out the ground, and then obviously a mid case, that would be a good, great case scenario. Mid case is, there's a lot of smoke, and we take either an equity investment or an option for portions of the projects with a major prior to that, which again we're open to. It's just got to be the right deal for Kobrea and our shareholders.
Right. Okay, James. I mean, I think it's an excellent account, and we'll be keen on following up with an update when we see the first drill holes. I guess we sort of probably in April or May or something like this. So that will be good, and we look forward to that. So thank you for your time, James.
No, thanks for your time, Gorm.